So today we're looking at induction cooking and what it is and why it's right for your home. My name is Mark Dusler. As Brianna said, I'm the consulting chef here at Frontier Energy. And our mission is to cut carbon, right? We try to make that really broad because as we are moving into these worlds where, we're always kind of trying to look at, what's the best way to do that. Sometimes it's using more efficient gas equipment if that's needed at the time, or it's switching to electrification or electric equipment entirely. But really our goal is to help. We're fuel agnostic, and our goal is to really help in any way we can to really just start cutting that carbon footprint. I want to thank PG&E for sponsoring today's class. They've been doing a really great job of helping us, especially with these emerging technologies, get that message out there and really make this much more accessible to so many folks who may otherwise not have been exposed to these technologies. We do like to add in these disclaimers. And this is really just all the legalese type stuff. This will be included in our PDF handouts if anybody wants to see that. Or in the recording. So you're more than welcome to read all of that. And of course, we have to put in our authorization for release of all this information if you wanted to use it for anything other than what it's intended. So our agenda is going to be what is induction cooking and how does that work? The types of induction for home kitchens. And kind of an introduction to our Q&A. I have a few different pieces here that, if you have any questions, we can look at those pieces more in the more physical world, or at least the one that I'm standing in. Okay, so our learning goals are going to be, we're going to explain what induction is and how it works, obviously. We're going to describe those types of cooktops and what's available. Discuss how induction compares to standard electric and gas ranges. I think that one is kind of a big one. There's a lot of misnomers out there, or maybe assumptions that are rightfully made, but we really want to address those. And then explain the non-energy benefits of induction as well. So chapter 1, obviously, what is induction? So, in the technical side, it's an electrically charged copper coil underneath this cooktop, right? So what we're doing is, I'm going to put all this up here, but I'm going to speak in real people speak because that's how I understand it. And really what you're doing is you're creating this electromagnetic field. You can think of it as like when you take your hands and you rub them together, right? We think of it as like, okay, we're creating heat through friction. Well, we're actually just transferring energy from the food that we ate earlier. If you want to think about it that way, we're transferring it through our muscles more so than just rubbing our hands together. And that transfer is just transferring into heat energy, right? That mechanical energy. But we're kind of doing the same thing here. We're not making electricity, we're not making anything, but what we are doing is we're transferring that electricity into an electromagnetic field. When you make a copper coil, if it's round and you stick it in a cylinder, that's how we would get a motor. So we'd have, you can create motion out of that, or force, physical work, or we can create these electromagnetic fields. So depending on how much power we put into it, that messes with, or that determines the intensity of those alternating magnetic fields. And what happens is you need a ferrous metal pan. So we need to have some type of magnetic metal inside. So iron obviously is going to be your best material, and the more iron, the better it's going to work. So that will help kind of address some of those questions I know some people have about like what kind of pans can I use and all that. Well, essentially what you're trying to do is you're just trying to find something with more iron, and there's a few different ways you can achieve that, and that really increases the performance. So what you're doing is you're creating these magnetic fields all over the place. What that's doing is essentially the same thing as you rubbing your hands together, right? We're taking all the molecules that are inside the metal and we're moving them around. The more intense we can move them around, the hotter the pan will get. So what's interesting about that is when we look at the innards here, we notice that there's the coil. Sorry, I got a little off, but what I'm trying to say is that as we move those molecules together, the faster we move them together, the more the pan will heat. Now, the cool thing about that is that there's some accuracy within that. So however fast we move them is as intense and as hot as the pan will get. So I'm going to skip this part. I don't know why it keeps playing, but this is what I wanted to show you is we actually have the unit here. And because I think this is more interesting than trying to do it just through video. And it's showing that temperature sensor, which is right here. So this is our copper coil. This is our electronics here and our fan. It's really actually important to make sure that these things stay cool. So when you're going to put them in your house or in a kitchen or in anywhere, you do have to keep in mind that they do need to have air to move over them to keep the electronics themselves cool. So on the inside, as I said, we have the coil and we have this thermistor. And what the thermistor is it's a temperature sensor that tells the unit itself how hot this glass plate is. So this glass plate, a lot of people worry, like, is it going to shatter? Is it going to break? They're actually pretty tough. It's glass impregnated with ceramic. Now, the higher quality, obviously, or the more expensive the units, typically the higher the quality, less chance of breakage and all that good stuff. And so what that does is it sits right here, and that actually gives the unit feedback. So it can say, okay, well, I'm making things, I'm turning it up really, really high, so the pan is becoming really, really hot. Well, the unit can actually adjust and say, okay, it's getting this hot, I need to adjust and turn down, or be able to modulate my power. You can also cook by, as I said, by power. So that's kind of more like our typical units we would have at home, where you have a dial even, so it'd be like 1 to 10 or 1 to 12. But then you can also cook by temperature. So what it's doing is it's taking that temperature off of the glass here, and then it can actually maintain that temperature as you work. And then as you saw there, that video, which is pretty interesting, that's actually off of this unit here, is because we need the pan to basically make that magnetic field work. If we remove the pan and the field isn't working, then the unit is not generating, it's not really using any energy other than maybe in the electronics. It's not generating energy. So the glass surface itself is not really getting hot. The pan itself is getting hot because you're actually just moving the metal around inside the pan. Now you will get some heat bleeding through, right? Because if you, like, let's say you cook a bunch of hot oil, or you're using like a wok style induction unit, which we'll talk about, or you're sauteing and you're at a really high temperature, yeah, you're going to get some temperature that's going to bleed back out into the glass, but it's still going to be far less than, say, a gas range, or even some of you may have experienced like those ceramic resistant element tops, the infrared ones, where they get really, really screaming hot. And those can be kind of dangerous because if you turn them off, and even if after they stop glowing, that surface can remain hot for quite a bit of time. As you can see here, we have the old magnet trick. We like to include this in a lot of our presentations because it's a great way to start identifying what pans can be used and ones that cannot. However, it's not always true. There are plenty of pans out there, especially stainless pans, where they still work on induction units just fine, but there might not be enough of that ferrous metal, in one spot to actually make that magnet stick. So I would say, try the pans that you have and see if they work first before you just kind of cast them all away. Another thing on the pans would be, I think a lot of us, my family included, when I was younger, we've since pared that down quite a bit. But I would say look at how many pans you really have, and people say, oh, it's so expensive to buy the new pans. But, there's only 4 burners or 4 hobs on the unit. So, I mean, how many pans can you really possibly use at any given time? And we of course had the whole cupboard full of pans, and maybe we always only use maybe 3 of those pans consistently. So what I would say is really reevaluate what you're using and why you're using it. And it is worth, maybe making that investment into buying just a few nicer pans that last you longer. They're better at heat transfer. They make cooking a little bit more pleasurable. And if you don't want to go too expensive, you can also use steel pans. So like black steel pans are not very expensive. You can get them for maybe 20 bucks. The one caveat to that is obviously black steel and cast iron pans, which work really good. You don't want to throw them in your dishwasher. It's best to just wash them with a little bit of water. But once you build them up, if anybody here is used to seasoning the pans, the cast iron, I mean, we have some that have been handed down from the last generation, and they really are pretty non-stick. So you just hit them with a little bit of hot water. Maybe you put them back on the stove if you've got some stuff in there, and let them just sit with some warm water, turn the induction unit on, and then just go over and clean them out. And it actually makes cleanup much easier. So let's see here. Summarizing on this, right? Induction works by actually just heating the pan. I think that's a really, really critical piece. Remember, it's not the unit itself that's actually having to conduct the heat into the pan. It's actually the pan itself that is heating. Induction cooking requires a magnetic pan, right? I know we just talked a lot about that, but it is important to note that you do want to make sure that it does have some type of ferrous metal inside of it. And that the cooktop is pretty durable, right? So it is this ceramic glass. It's not just going to break. Now, obviously, you take care of it, it takes care of you. It doesn't mean you would want to abuse it. But they are pretty tough. And it is nice, though, to make sure I'm sure it is good to make sure that you take good care of them. A lot of times too, if you're doing pretty light work, you could, like, let's say you're boiling water or something like that. I would not recommend this if you're cooking at high temperatures. You can have you can wipe these things down without actually really worrying about burning yourself or hurting anything. And I've even seen people, just for demonstration, I'm not saying do this at your house, but they'll actually put a towel down and cook right over the towel so it moves through there. But again, you really can minimize the making of a mess during cook time if you use things like that while you're cooking. Wipe it down as you're going. It makes it a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about like hot grates or hot elements if you're using electric resistance. So getting into the efficiency performance, that's really where we see a big difference between gas, electric resistance, and the induction unit. Yeah, one of our biggest hurdles is a lot of folks, including myself, have had a lot of experience with the poorly performing electric resistance ranges. I remember having them through various points in my life, and you get to that point where you learn how to like turn it down and like move the pan off, let it cool down, put it back on. They're really, really poor. They're not very responsive, right? You like it takes forever to heat up, takes forever to cool down. You try and change temperature, that takes forever. You start getting warping issues sometimes with some of your pans because that intensity. So they work really well in the beginning when everything sits flat, but then as you get warp pans, they don't work as well. It can be really, really frustrating. I think it's important to know that induction does not work that way. So how does it differ? Traditional range top uses resistant elements, right? So we're still doing that that conduction of energy into the pan. So what we're doing is we're taking an element, we're making a coil a little bit different here, and we're just basically through resistance, like heating up that coil, and it's heating the pan by doing that, right? Where through conduction, the heat is transferred to the cookware through conduction, right? The contact of the cookware with the heating element. The heating element is slow, obviously. It's easy to overshoot your set point, which is just wherever your desired temperature is, and remains hot long after you remove the cookware. The good news is we've actually done some studies through SMUD, and we were able to do what we do is boil tests a lot of the time. So we'll take an induction unit, we'll take an electric resistance unit, and we'll take a gas unit, and we do boil tests. The reason we do that's not very like sexy, I guess, as far as food goes, but water is actually very energy intensive when it comes to trying to get it to phase change or rise in temperature. It requires an incredible amount of energy. And it's also a very stable medium to be able to use. So we start all the water at the same temperature, we can start at the same weight, and it really gives us a way to compare. And that's what you can see here. So we see here the water heat up rate at the bottom there. You see the test time, and then we can see that water temperature. We typically stop at 200, and that's because it's the best way to be able to capture that whole stream without going into like actual boiling. It becomes a little bit irrelevant at that point. We would rather just be able to capture all of them at one fixed point, and 200 degrees we find is the best. And what we do is we fill them all up, as I just said, with a little bit of water by poundage. So they all start with the same containers, the same water, and then we see how long that takes to reach that at max. As you can see, the induction is considerably faster, and the gas burner is at the very end. So the reason is because your induction is about 90% efficient. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but 90%. So when you think about it, I like to use dollars, actually, because most people can understand that. $1 is 100 pennies, so 1 penny being 1%. So that means 90 cents of whatever of the energy that you're using is actually making it into your pan. It hovers depending on how much metal or how the quality of the pan, but you're usually about like 88 to 92%, which is pretty good. Your best gas ranges, now this includes commercial gas ranges, all of them, right? Your best gas ranges are around 35%. So that means only 35 cents of all of the energy that you're putting into your pan is actually making it to the pan. The rest of it is going out the sides, it's going into your kitchen. I think we've all experienced the Thanksgiving with the hot kitchen. Well, that hot, or the hot house. Well, that hot house or that hot kitchen, a lot of that heat, yes, it's the people inside, but most of it is actually just heat that you purchased, or energy that you purchased, excuse me, that actually just didn't make it to the food. It's just spilling into the space. So you'll notice that there are these ancillary benefits. One being that it keeps the space cooler, so that can affect your HVAC and all those things. But also you're able to cook a little bit faster. As you can see there, I mean, we're shaving minutes off. The electric resistance ranges, they do heat up faster, but then again, you're not getting that same response time that we all like to have, like when we're using gas ranges. And there does become an issue over time where, you know, if you do have pan warpage, we found that performance actually starts to drop. And be pretty surprised at how fast those pans start to warp. Now, when we do the testing for the residential cooktops, you can see there we do try to find representative pots and pans. We're not out there trying to use like commercial pots and pans for doing that testing. We want to make it as comparative and as relatable as possible. So as you can see there, we're just trying to highlight, you know, that's our set point. And then of course, you can really see in that window there that the induction was pretty consistent and and quite a bit faster than the electric resistance and the gas ranges. Yeah, we're way over there, 18, 19 minutes. Whereas, you know, we're at 10, 11 minutes. That's half the time, right? So if you're cooking pasta, you're doing things like that. It is also important to note too that once you do reach that point, because you are able to reach that point faster, it also means that you're able to recover faster. That's a big part of cooking. So once I put something inside the pot, or you know, we call that a thermal mass or a thermal, you know, we put something in there and it drops the temperature. Well, because you're able to, because you're more efficient and you're able to get more energy to the water or whatever it is you're trying to cook, that means that you're back up the temperature and cooking a lot faster, and it's much more stable. So you know exactly where you're going to be. Whereas, you know, if it takes longer to heat up and I put a bunch of pasta or I put something in there and it kind of sits there for a little while and then it comes back up, well, that's going to affect the overall outcome of whatever I'm trying to make. So what we have here is the secret weapon, right? We call it the power boost setting. And what that is basically you're able to modulate through the software. You're actually able to boost different burners depending on what you're trying to do. And that's how they're able to achieve, you know, these higher settings, right? Or as we were talking about earlier, remember the more intense, right? The more current that you can get into that magnetic field, obviously the better performance you're going to get out of it. Well, you can't really have all of these units, let's say, running at, you know, 3,000, 4,000 watts all at the same time. Just the amp draw would be too high for your home. So what they have done is they've figured out, and rarely, I mean, if you're running all of these at high anyway, that I don't know what you're doing, but that'd be pretty crazy. So, you know, obviously, for the most part, you're going to be running them at different intensities. Well, the unit is actually able to detect that and then just feed whichever one it needs that amount of power and constantly be able to modulate that. But where that comes into play is, like, let's say you do have two things that are running really, really high, right? I'm trying to boil a lot of water here, and for whatever reason, I'm, you know, maybe I'm making pasta sauce or something, or I don't know what you're doing, but it's really high over here. Well, the unit's actually able to take whatever these two are not using, let's say if they're separated, and it'll actually give it to these. So that way it's always able to modulate that, and you're able to have a lot of firepower in your home without having to you know, resize panels, and you can still use the same hookup that you've already had if you did have like an electric resistance range. But you're actually getting a lot more power out of it. These have the boost. A lot of them also will have, on the other side, they'll have simmer, which is kind of neat. So you can just, it's the same thing as turning to low, but it's even lower than low. So it'll just really kind of hold it at a pretty gentle temperature. And it won't, you don't have to worry about, like, as things start to reduce. That's one of the big things in when you're making sauces or stocks or things like that. You know, as that volume reduces, it takes less energy to obviously increase the temperature. So what can happen is you can start messing up or overcooking stocks or sauces. So when you keep them on those simmer settings, it'll actually, as that volume goes down, it'll always just maintain that certain level. So here's a great way to, we have a FLIR camera, and FLIR detects heat, right? So what we're able to see here is on the, I guess it's on your left-hand side, you'd see the induction or the induction side. You'll see that the pot has, like, it's kind of misleading in a way, because you're like, oh, well, look at all that heat going up the side. Well, that's actually all the heat energy inside the pot. You know, that's the pot itself being hot because the temperature of the items inside the pot are able to be at a higher temperature. Whereas you see on the gas side, you'll see that, you know, a lot of that is actually reduced in temperature because it's being diluted by the air and everything else around it. So it's much more intense, and you're getting that's that 90%, right? You're seeing it right there. That's that 90%. It's really just making it to the pot. It's much more effective. And the nice thing about that too is that 90% is just as effective when you're at, say, medium. You know, you're not trying to, you know, blast the food, but you know, when you're at that medium setting, you're really able to capture much more of that heat. And actually, what you'll find is, and this is one of the things that takes a little bit of getting used to with the induction, is you actually start turning things down, right? So when we cook, we actually get used to that fact that maybe it's the electric resistance or maybe it's the gas. That because of that inefficiency, we overshoot temperature to compensate for the fact that that temperature is going to drop when we put something in it. Well, with the induction, it's very stable. So whatever you set it to, the pan, you know, it takes a second for it to preheat, but once it preheats, it's not really going to drop in temperature unless you really overload it. So you'll find that you actually start having to turn everything down, which is nice because that means ultimately you're using less energy. So yeah, right here, this particular unit that we did was 85% efficient, but it's only heating the pan, right? Whereas our gas ranges right here are 35% efficient. And that's right there due to the fact that it is heating the air. It uses air obviously to burn, but then it's also just spilling even more of that heat out. So this is what we were just talking about there. This is that overshoot. So what we're seeing there is once we get to that 200, you know, what is it actually having to do to get back down? And as you can see, obviously the electric resistance is going to be the worst because that coil heats up. It takes forever to go back down. That's when we're all getting frustrated. And I think it's important to note too that when you do have to let's say you have to remove the pan from that coil so that it you don't burn your food because the thing is going to stay hot for a while. That heat too is also spilling into your space. So because that heat's spilling in your space, that can affect all different kinds of things. It can affect if it's hot outside, it's just going to make your house hotter. It can affect just the area itself. If liquid or sauce or things like that get on those things, it can be a pain to clean. So that there's all these little, which takes you time to clean it up, which all add up. So I think it is really a critical thing to think about are all these ancillary benefits. So the induction and the gas, well, we're using let's see how we can kind of explain this. When we talk about a gas burner, we talk about electric element, we talk about an induction hob. So when you are going out and you're asking about it, you definitely want to know the differences. And of course, that's based on the type of fuel and how it works. So the electric resistance element and the induction hob would probably be the two you're going to be obviously looking at, because if it's electric, those would be the two. They're obviously different. Where I would say you want to make sure that you're really kind of doing your homework are those flat ceramic top, where they basically take the electric elements and they bury them inside a glass top. And they can appear to be like an induction unit, but if you see that red coil heating up, let's say you're at your local appliance store and they're showing you something, and it's maybe not their fault. A lot of people don't know the difference between the two. They just see, oh, it's a black top and it heats up or whatever it is. That resistance coil in there, maybe they don't know the difference between the two, and they might be selling you, the wrong thing. So if you see that coil inside there, if it looks just like this, but that heats up, that's not the right unit for you. You want to make sure that, usually somewhere it'll specify induction, but it's definitely good to be sure just in case, like this one says it right here. And it's for just that reason. So we have a little bit of a comparison here, and we have between the induction hob, the gas burner, and the electric element. So fast heat up, as we see there, we didn't really give that to the element because we did give over time. We did factor in the fact that the pans do have that issue where they're not really making good contact. Quick temperature response, induction and gas, they both have that. We all know that the electric resistance does not have that. It's the opposite. Quick cool down, induction and gas both have that. I will say that induction is actually still faster than the gas. And that's just because the pan itself is generating the heat, you're not going to have as much bleed over. The electric element, of course, does not have that. It's not very responsive. And then good for saute. Yeah, right. Because of that responsiveness, yeah, you're able to do a little bit more saute work. You're able to turn it up, turn it down, do all that good stuff. Whereas with the electric element, it's not responsive at all and can be quite frustrating when you're trying to do things like saute. Here's a quick video. I'm going to play this for you. This is with a commercial unit, but as I said, it's one of the neat areas where the commercial and residential actually do play well together, and it's pretty comparative. This unit here is about 5,000 watts per hob, so a little bit, but I would say if you notice there, it's only at 3. And the reason being is if I had that thing at 12, my fish would probably catch on fire and everybody running out of the kitchen because it is very, very intense. But what you'll see here is what's nice is the heating, as long as you're choosing the right size pan, is pretty uniform. The whole pan will heat, as long as it's over that hob, the whole thing will heat pretty evenly. So here we're cooking fish. We chose fish for a reason, because it is it's a gentle protein. And one of the other things we wanted to show here, especially from the commercial side, and one of the issues with gas versus electric, is that when you're and these units will do it too if you get the ones that actually have the software that can detect this, is basting, right? So you see here, or aerosé is what we call it, and that's kind of a big deal. So if you want to start incorporating that at home. But what we're trying to show here is that one of the issues when you're using the induction units, if you use ones that where the sensors cannot detect it, if you remove the pan too much, it'll stop detecting, and the unit will turn off. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it can be a little bit frustrating if you're trying to do a little bit more technical work like that. So let's look at some of the non-energy benefits. I kept bringing up the ancillary benefits, and we can kind of break that into these 3: safety, precision, and performance. So from the safety side, remember we were talking about the fact that we're not really having to bleed all of that heat into the space. And it's also not getting all over the grate. So you can see here, we're cooking some mushrooms there at a pretty even temperature. Be able to pick it up without a towel. That's another issue, right? Is because this is what I was talking about before, where we're using that towel to illustrate that heat transfer is not as extreme, right? If we put that on a gas range or electric, that thing would be up in flames or smoking. But also, you're not having to grab the pans with a hand towel, which is common, probably more so in commercial kitchens, but maybe use an oven mitt or a hand mitt at home, because you do get that, especially with the gas ranges, you're going to get that convective heat coming up, and it's starting to heat the pan. There's nothing worse than grabbing that pan, and it'll ruin your weekend for sure. To touch back on the pans just for 1 second while I'm thinking about it, I would say regardless of the pans you do use on any unit, gas, electric, I'd recommend trying to find pans with all metal handles. Try and stay away from plastic handles if you can. One, they can melt. They can become really flexible if you're using them over a high heat situation. Plastic's not very stable in that way. But also, you have an oven, and a lot of times, especially in the commercial world, if you want to start using this at home, like let's say you're cooking chicken breasts or you're cooking thighs or whatever that might be, we'll often keep our ovens at a high temperature, and we'll actually finish that cooking inside the oven. The lower, the closer to the bottom, obviously the hotter it's going to be, so you can still get that color. It's just kind of a inside baseball trick there is, and the reason we do that is, one, maybe we want to use the burners for something else, but two, this is a nice, even heating, big box of heat, right? So if it's getting hit with all that heat energy all around it, it's able to cook a little bit faster than up here, and it's actually able to cook a little bit more evenly. So if we're cooking just on the stovetop, we're really just hitting that from one side, whereas if it's in the oven, we're able to hit it from all sides. And the closer you are to the bottom of the oven, you're still going to be able to get some of that color. Now, again, that takes a little bit of practice, but that is something that we do commonly. And you obviously cannot do that if you have plastic handles. I think that there's a big safety issue there. And I'd recommend, if you can, always try to get metal handles. So one of the other things we talked about there was precision control. And this is kind of neat, right? So you have the ability to be able to cook by temperature. I would say, in the beginning, people tend to want to play with that a lot. But I would say in the beginning, it's more important just to try and go with what you know, or try to make it more simple than that. Just cook by the power settings of, a lot of the units, like the built-in units, not all of them have the temperature setting. You'd probably have to ask just to make sure. But, they all definitely have a power setting. But let's say it did have both of those options, I would recommend in the beginning to not try and cook by temperature, because you haven't done that in the past. And that can maybe become a little bit overwhelming or kind of frustrating. It'd be better just to learn with a number, and then go back and start messing with temperature a little bit more. Really, where you're going to be wanting to use temperature the most would be, we'll talk about this as like a double boiler. So if you're doing a lot of chocolate work or things like that, you can set the temperature low and you can melt chocolate without having to use water as like a buffer. If you do want to boil water, you want to make stocks or sauces, cooking by temperature is nice. You know, you can set it at 188 or 190 or whatever it is you want to do, and it'll actually, you know, maintain that temperature as things reduce. You don't have to worry about it boiling and potentially ruining those things. So they can help save time, right? Because you're not having to check it all the time. It reduces your food waste. We would just call that food waste. In the sense of commercial world, if it's too far gone, it's probably going to have to throw it away. At home, maybe you can get creative and use it for something. But again, it still kind of goes back to the time issue. You know, you have this expectation, you're trying to do something, and if it gets a little bit messed up, that can be kind of frustrating. It does enable some sous vide style cooking, and that's just because you're able to maintain a certain amount of stable temperature. It's not going to be super exact, but it is kind of fun to play with. And you don't necessarily need a vacuum sealer if you want to just start out messing with sous vide. You can do things like take a bag, put it in, take like a Ziploc bag, and get like maybe like chip clips or even those little paper clips or, you know, like file folding clips. You can fill a pot full of water, fill something, you put the proteins inside or whatever else it is, that, whatever it is you want to sous vide. You dip it in the water so the water kind of envelops it and pushes all the air out. You seal it up. You can put it on your pot. You can set your temperature. And then you just use those little clips to hold the top of the bag, obviously, out of the water. Make sure everything else is submerged. Sometimes you might have to weigh it down with like a smaller pot lid or whatever that takes. And then, you know, you can cover it too. I'd always recommend covering because then, you know, you're not just letting the heat spill out. It's easier for it to maintain temperature. And you can do, you know, some very rudimentary sous vide style cooking. And we'd reduce the need for double boilers. So induction cooktops are more child safe, obviously, because we have less chance of them touching hot surfaces and burning themselves. No open flame, so less chance of. I was in 7th grade. I set my kitchen on fire. My parents were super upset. Probably wouldn't have happened if we had an induction unit. And then, of course, cleanability. This is just a really quick video showing, you know, you literally can just wipe the whole thing up, clean and ready to go. And if you're purchasing renewable energy, you can, or, you know, you're one step closer to that zero carbon kitchen and zero carbon footprint in your own home. So really quick, here's just a few different types. There's the one on the top left there, that's a drop-in unit. So is the one in the island. And then there's a range oven combo right there that you just kind of slide in. That's very similar to the one I have right here. And then these are just a few different variations of that. So you can see that they actually make wok units. They're really nice, really sleek, pretty easy to keep clean. And then, you know, the easiest way to start is just with using these portable units. It's pretty low barrier to entry. And it's actually a really great way to try out induction and see if it's something you like while maybe you're busy trying to make that decision. So great way to try it out. This is something that's new to our area, is that in 2022, induction will, there'll be an induction lending program in the PG&E territory. It hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, but they're very interested in doing this, and we're excited to be a part.
Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Kim Bosch, and I am with PG&E. And tonight I'm going to be discussing with you some rate options, as well as bringing you program awareness. And Brianna, are you sharing the slides?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, everyone can see the slides right now.
I just see a question mark.
How about now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So on our agenda tonight, we're going to review rate options and how you can find the plan that's right for you. The importance of updating your communication preferences, including your language preference, as well as a review of assistance programs that are available to you to help with your utility costs. So first up is our rate options. So PG&E knows that each of our lifestyles are unique, and there's not one rate that's going to fit all of our needs. So we actually have 3 different types of rates that you can choose from. First is our time of use rate plans. So with time of use, it depends on when you're using your energy as much as how much energy you're using. So you have your peak hours and your off-peak hours. And the most expensive time to use your energy is during the peak hours. And if you want to shift your usage to outside those peak hours, and then that will help lower your utility bill. There are two time of use rate plans. There's the time of use peak pricing, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day, which means that between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., 7 days a week is the most expensive time to use your energy. So you would want to shift your larger appliances like your dishwasher and your laundry. If you have a pool, your pool pump, to your off-peak hours, which is any time outside of that 4 to 9 p.m. range. The second time of use option is the time of use peak pricing, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. weekdays, which means that 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday is the most expensive time to use your energy. So again, you'd want to shift your larger appliances to outside of those peak hours, which is outside of 5 to 8. And something that is important to note is your everyday lifestyle of cooking, watching TV, charging your devices, that does not pull a lot of energy. So please do your normal everyday cooking and TV watching during those peak hours. That is absolutely not going to impact your bill. The other option is the tiered rate plan. The tiered rate plan is you start on the lowest cost tier, and the more energy you use, the higher the tier, the higher the price. Now, it can be a little more difficult to help conserve on the tiered rate plan because it doesn't depend on when you're using it, but how much energy you're using overall. So you'd want to keep your usage low in the lowest tier, which is tier 1, which can be hard to do because most of us think we're doing all we can to conserve. So that's one of the perks of the time of use rate plan, is it's a little easier to manage in terms of conservation because you just have to be more mindful of when you're using it versus how much you're using. And last, we have electric vehicle rate plans. So if you have an electric vehicle or you have battery storage in your home, then this may be a good option for you. And we encourage you to run a rate option 2 times a year to make sure you're on the best rate plan for your home. And to run the rate analysis or to learn more about your rate options, please visit pge.com/rate choices. And next up is your contact information. It is very important that PG&E has your most up-to-date contact information, including your phone number and email address. And the primary reason is for emergencies. In the event of a power outage, or if there's a public safety power shutoff, we want to make sure that we can get a hold of you to inform you of those events. And also for your energy statements. So we want to make sure that we're communicating with you in your preferred language. So if you prefer to receive your energy statement in a language other than English, you can update that as well. And there's multiple languages available, such as Spanish, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And you can update all your language preferences online by simply logging into your account at pge.com or give us a call. 1-800-743-5000, and a customer service representative will help you get that updated. Now, we have programs that are available to help you manage your utility costs. We have the Care or Fair program, which is an income-based program. And if you are eligible, you can receive about a 25% discount on your monthly utility bill. And for more information or to see if you're eligible to apply, please visit pge.com/carefera. We also have the medical baseline program. Now, the medical baseline program is not based on income. This is strictly if you have a medical need. So if you have a medical need that will allow you to use more energy at the lowest price to help offset the use of that medical equipment in the home. And in addition, you will receive additional notifications in the event of a public safety power shutoff. And for more information or to apply, please visit pge.com/medical baseline. And another program we wanted to bring to your awareness is the Energy Assistance Program. This program is dependent upon being enrolled or eligible to enroll in the Care or Fair program, but this offers free home energy upgrades to your home, which is to make your home more energy efficient, and that will in turn lower your monthly bill. And for more information on that, please visit pge.com/ESA. And just to recap with you, we just really want to let you know that you have rate options. So please, we highly encourage you to run a rate analysis to make sure you're on the best rate for your home. And you can do so at pge.com/rate choices. Also, please make sure you have your most up-to-date contact information on file so we can reach you, as well as if you would prefer us to communicate with you in a language other than English, you can update that as well. And please make sure that you look into our assistance programs if there's some that you feel you may be eligible for. There's the Care and Fair program, the Medical Baseline, as well as the Energy Savings Assistance Program. And for additional resources, we have a really great website at pge.com/COVID-19. And that's all that I have tonight, but I'm so happy that you had me on to share. And please feel free to contact me anytime. My email's on the screen as well as my phone number. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was very informative. And it looks like we are great on time. I'm glad we fit everything into the agenda. I know that always is the struggle with workshops, especially during the evening. So thank you very much, Chef Mark and Kim. Now we can visit the Q&A. I have a lot of personal questions coming in the chat. And so let's go ahead and get those answered. First question is, let's see. Are there any cooktops that will magnetically lock pans to avoid spills or knockoff cooktop?
No, I haven't seen that. The magnets, so it's generating magnetic fields. It's not necessarily like trying to pull the pan to the surface. So I haven't seen anything like that that's available.
Great, thank you. Next question is Chef Dulcer, are you using a portable induction unit? Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. I broke my glasses, so it's a little hard for me to see. But is
Okay.
Chef Dulcer using portable induction units or commercial restaurant style units?
Oh, that's a good question. This unit here is not portable. This unit would normally fit, between two cabinets or something like that. We keep it out here, obviously, so we can move it around. There are some commercial induction units behind me. These two here are commercial. However, these are pretty similar to what you would find actually at home. That's why I was saying the cool thing about a lot of the induction stuff is it's not really much different if you're, voltage for voltage. So these are both 120 volt units. You can find something similar, say on Amazon or wherever. You can buy a 120 volt unit. They cap out at 1800 watts. It's just as high as you can get with 120 volts. But it does mean that you were able to achieve, some pretty powerful cooking ability in a relatively small package. So you might see this footprint being a little bit smaller. Maybe it's not made out of thick stainless because it's not supposed to be getting beat up all the time. But essentially, it is the same. That's what's really neat about the accessibility to the induction. And they're not really that expensive. It is a great way to get yourself familiar with before you make the leap. And as I said, the barrier to entry is actually pretty low. I mean, I've seen a lot of units that are maybe $100, and sometimes they come with a pan. Now, I just be aware that, you get what you pay for to some degree, right? They do work really well, but obviously there is a difference between something that costs $1,000 and something that costs $100. Maybe it won't last, forever, but at least I think it's a great way to start exploring the functionality of induction. Maybe start cooking eggs in the morning or something. That's a really great way to start, and just really be able to see how that sensitivity works, become familiar with it, and then it might also prompt you to have more questions. So when you do go somewhere, don't be afraid to ask those questions. You can certainly reach out to us. We might be able to answer them. Not to toot our horn, but we do a lot of work with induction, so we might be able to answer some of those questions a little bit easier than, say, somebody who might not be as familiar, who's just trying to sell units. I'm not going to say, but you never know.
Great, thank you so much, Chef Dulcer. The next question is, wouldn't the clips get an induced current and thus hot? Jerry, I'm not sure what clips you're referring to.
He's talking about, I think he's talking about the sous vide. I'm going to guess that's probably what he's talking about. He'll probably respond yes or no. Do the clips get hot? Yeah, they might. I mean, I probably wouldn't risk probably grabbing it without something, but if you're using a tall pot, they're going to be far enough away from the current or the magnetic fields, and they probably won't get that hot. I haven't experienced them getting hot myself, so I don't want to say that they won't. That usually comes with the other question, which is, are pacemakers safe? I believe the FCC, because it is a wave, they have not found any danger in using induction with pacemakers or things like that. I mean, I wouldn't recommend like sticking yourself over the top. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that anyway, but yeah, there hasn't been any evidence of that being an issue either.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what are power requirements? What do I need for my electric panel?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that varies really. I know that's a horrible way to answer a question, but it is true. Like, different homes have different abilities to provide power depending on if you live in an area where there's more gas or electricity and when the home was built. What I can say is that for the most part, there are industry standards with building houses, and there's codes and standards. So if you did have an electric resistance range, typically I think it's a 50 amp breaker. So these are designed to fit on that same 50 amp breaker. That's why they use that power modulation to achieve their performance, or they're also able to do that, right? We wouldn't be able to do that with electric resistance. So it should be pretty plug and play. Obviously, you're going to have an electrician helping you when you're doing that work, obviously. So they'll be able to help you with that when you're doing that installation. As far as the portable units go, I mean, you're good to go. Now, obviously, depending on the age of your house too, if you do pull a lot of current at once, you might trip breakers or things like that, but they're pretty safe. Like, I don't see there being any issue of you overloading anything.
Great, thank you. And yes, make sure that you have an electrician help you out with that. The next question is, what is the price range for the residential induction units?
Yeah, that can vary. My parents actually put one in. They're in Southern California, but I think it was like they went more on the simple side, and I think it was like all said and done, maybe like $800 for a drop-in unit. Of course, in this day and age, they can be as much as you would like to spend. So on the high end, who knows, right? I mean, you want to have all the bells and whistles and do all that stuff. I mean, they can get up to like $3,500, $4,000 for, I think us regular folk, and then who knows where they can go from there. But I would say, they generally are within the $800 to $3,500 range. Now, obviously compared to, say, your traditional gas and electric resistance ranges, yeah, if you compare in prices, there's a significant price jump there. But I think that's where it is nice to be able to do that work in the beginning. So maybe get that little tabletop hob, understand how it works, and say, yeah, this really would work. And to what Kim was speaking about, there are these other, and these are tough to quantify, are these other ancillary benefits, right? So oftentimes you say, yeah, it's so much more expensive to buy this unit, but if your air conditioning is running 2-3 more weeks out of the year, you'd be surprised how much that actually adds up, because the temperature in your house won't come down, you could be spending that maybe on average in 2 to 3 years, you might be able to recoup that cost. Again, that's hard to quantify, but those things are very real.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are there any tax rebates or subsidies available? I'm in Alameda County, not based on income, just to incentivize low carbon. Yes, Gina, there are a lot, and that's why I was trying to Google them right now to pull them up for you. If I don't find them within the next 3 minutes, I will definitely include all the rebate information in the follow-up email, which you will receive either Thursday or Friday. For starters, Bayren has some options off the top of my head. I believe Alameda County has some options as well. But I need to pull together the rebate information for you. And yes, there is definitely rebate options available. If anyone also has PG&E questions as well, please chime in with some PG&E questions. Okay, I guess there's no PG&E questions. I have a question coming in. Total transparency, please. What do people that adopt induction complain about?
What do they complain about? I would say it's probably the most common complaint. There's a few, actually. First one would usually be the pans, right? That one usually comes up right away. It's like, well, I have to buy all new pans. That's a common complaint. The next one would be, and I'm gonna pull this to be fully transparent. This comes more from the commercial side, but it certainly plays into everybody. And the reason we like, I think, or one of the big reasons that we like gas ranges is that we can see the flame. So cooking in this way is not an exact science, right? We're not trying to, it's not maybe like an oven where we're trying to set it to a certain temperature and we're trying to bake, or it's you know, all cooking is basically like if you want to think of it as like a distance, rate, and time problem. So when we lose that ability to see the flame, I think that kind of makes people get a little bit lost and a little bit anxious, and they will typically cite that first. However, that was why I was saying use the power settings rather than using the temperature settings, is because more often than not, what ends up happening is you start to remember knob position. The reason I use line cooks is because they're doing the same cycle. They're doing you know, the same 5 processes over and over and over again, and pretty fast. Whether, you know, it could be 12 different dishes, but the processes are fairly similar. And so what ends up happening though is because induction is very stable and gas is not as stable always, you do start to remember those knob positions. And because it does like come to a certain point and then maintain that point, that starts to go away after a while. It just becomes, you have to familiarize yourself with that new way of heating your pans up essentially, and then working with it. That would probably be the most common one. It's like, it just, people feel like a little bit removed from it, but that tends to go away. And then as you saw, like this unit has like blue lights that go around it. So they do try to like emulate the feeling of gas. A lot of them do that. But you know, I think it's just like anything, like it's as complicated as you want to make it. If you go into it saying like, I need the blue lights, that's fine if you do need them. But if you go into it saying like, do I really need this stuff, or do I just like want to cook, or like focus on what you want to focus on, I would say. And oftentimes simpler is better. Yeah.
Also, to add on to that, I know just something that I had to adapt to, and I've heard others say the same, is because there's no open flame, you're not able to, I guess the word would be char food. Like, you know, when you cook a tortilla, I usually cook my tortillas on an open flame, so I get that charred feeling, the crispiness. So that was something I had to adapt to. But if you just get like a camal or something, or even, I don't know, with your corn on the cob, there's ways you can adapt to emulate the same char feeling as well. But also, Kim, Jerry clarified with me that the question of what are power requirements, what do I need for my electric panel, was actually meant for you. If you're able to chime in and answer with that.
It really is a great question, but unfortunately, it really, I wouldn't know. It's really based on, you know, the size of your panel, and then how much load your induction cooking is adding to that. PG&E could possibly help you with that, but we would need to know what size of the induction oven or cooktop you would be purchasing. But definitely an electrician could help you with that. So unfortunately, sorry, I'm not able to say for sure. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem, Kim. I think, Kim, I believe an electrician would be able to better answer that as well. And yes, char with a blowtorch. That'd be so funny. Char boiling with a blowtorch. That is a good idea. But yeah, yeah, I will check that out as well. Yes.
Another way you can achieve that char too, that's where cast iron pans do help, or they make a ribs pan or a comals or things like that, where you can add a small amount of fat, be that olive oil or something like that, and just brush it lightly on something. If the surface is hot, you will get that same char. You don't want to do it without the oil, because that oil actually helps with that transfer. But you can achieve those same, like, char on tortillas. Now there are some things like corn. I don't know. You might use like your broiler. Like, it doesn't mean you have to do things the same way either, right? So take your rack in your oven, put it to, set the broiler on high and rotate your corn that way, right? There's other ways of doing things. That's not a very uncommon way for us to do things even in there. Or sometimes we'll even take we'll take the racks out of the bottom of our ovens, and you just use the bottom of the oven directly, as long as there's not elements on there. You can use that flat bottom like a hot surface.
Yes. And I also want to emphasize that although I am not doing that with the tortillas anymore, I still will always recommend induction. It completely changed my life. Everything Chef Mark said about the quickness, efficiency, the heat reduction, all of it, it blows my mind. I don't understand why more kitchens are hesitant to adopt it. It's life-changing. But we have one more question, and then after that, let's wrap up. We are 4 minutes after. This last question is, how many amps does a typical residential induction cooktop 4-inch burner or 4-burner require? Simple question, no.
I can tell you, the funny thing about residential units is the nameplates are hard to find, but I would say they're usually it's right around 40 amps, but they're all designed to fit a 50 amp circuit. And that's for that very reason, right? Because typically the residential electric resistance in the panel, they're designed to meet that 50 amp breaker. So your house is usually, this is a huge caveat there. Kim's probably be like, tisk. But usually a house tops out at about 100 amps. Like, that's about, you're going to mostly see as like single family home, you're going to see about 100 amps. And that's if you have electric, like if you have electric dryer, that's on 30 amps. Your range top is 50 amps. And then everything else kind of has to fit within that other 20 amps of power. Again, that's like, I'm like, that's a very big, broad generalization. But if you want to think about it in that way, that's kind of how it works out. So within the industry, they design appliances to fit within that.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our presenters, Chef Mark Dulcer and Kim with PG&E. Please make sure to check out Frontier Energy and Fishnick on their websites. And that is the end of this workshop. Stay tuned for the follow-up materials tomorrow. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for your time.